Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. In this episode, we continue digging beneath the surface, this time dealing with the psychology, specifically with the Morphew daughters, Mallory and Macy. And the question we're going to be asking is, how can they not see what we're seeing? Do they think that their father is innocent? What are they seeing? How is it that they come to the conclusions that they do? How is this happening? I'm also going to touch on the statement from David S. Moorman, that's Suzanne's brother. We're just going to touch on a couple of statements that he made about, such as how did we get here? How does a man do this? I've to some extent touched on it in the previous video, but we'll go into it in a bit more detail in this episode. Now, I have spoken previously about developing a profile for Barry, and I do think pictures speak 1,000 words, and we see on his social media, on their social media, photos of Barry in fireman garb, working out, hunting, displaying trophies and that sort of thing. His home, his job, his appearance, all of that reinforces the same thing, that he's a man, that he's a mountain man, that he's a man's man, and he's also a hero to his daughters. And they've said as much. Mallory has said, "My dad is my hero," and it echoes something that Bella Watts also said not long before she lost her life. Barry Morphew, speaking about himself, has posted, "I've been to Canada, to Mexico, Colorado, to Africa, and have never met someone so special and have never seen someone more beautiful. She's beat cancer twice, raised two of the best girls ever, but most of all has put up with me for 32 years. And in the next slide, Suzanne says, "Wow, thanks, dear. I wish I still looked that young." And so she's obviously quite aware of her own appearance. And I took some flack in a video for suggesting that this incredible thought that, women, when they get older, may be concerned about their appearance, that they're not as youthful looking. Men may be concerned about the same thing in terms of themselves and in terms of their partners. And to say that apparently means you're a misogynist, because it's not normal, it's not natural, it's not something that is happening with most people eventually. It's misogyny, isn't it? I mean, it's not a case that all of us care about youthfulness, is it? But those who do are misogynists, I guess. Anyway, I guess it's good to at least keep a sense of humor, if we can, amongst the people who are, making these comments. In the next video following this one, I'll be dealing with, will Mallory and Macy testify against their dad? That'll be the episode following this, and I'll be using not case law, but cases that I've studied, that I'm familiar with, and where there are fathers implicated, and we will look at what has happened in previous cases and what we can expect from this one. Once again, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. You can click on the light blue icon on the bottom right of your screen, ring the bell for notifications, like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. So we have the same thing again. It seems to happen quite often, and we notice this with sympathy and compassion, that you have a situation such as you have here, where the father is implicated, he appears in court, he's charged with the murder of the mother, and then the daughters are still kind of on his side. They're still supporting him, they still seem to believe in his innocence. But how is that possible? You must remember, not everyone is ensconced within the true crime community, looking at true crime cases on a daily basis, familiar with this whole process. Some people are brought into the fold kicking and screaming because a family member has been implicated, right? Now, I think, to be fair, one's got to look at the both sides of the equation. That I'm sure Barry Morphew at a certain time was loved by his wife, loved by his children, and was a lovable figure, perhaps a lovable rogue. A person who probably was a good father himself, and probably was someone that his daughters admired for his masculinity, for perhaps his kind of like furry bear, a big furry teddy bear sort of persona, this sort of rugged guy with a soft side to him, perhaps a vulnerable side to him. And what is interesting in photos of the family is that you often see them at the beach. They all seem to be either suntanned or even sunburned. They do seem to be very outdoorsy people and kind of having a lot of fun. They seem to be going on boats. They seem to be quite sporty. But the question we really want answered is, how on earth can these children, faced with their mother's disappearance for a year and the society kind of pointing the finger, perhaps even wagging the finger towards their father, is there not a sense that they talk to one another? Is there not a sense of, well, does dad have an alibi? Is there not a sense of, were they ever arguing, right? And I'm going to try and answer that in a couple of different ways. I think the first way that is probably going to make some people feel uncomfortable is you might look at the daughters and say, I don't understand how they can live in a certain reality when another reality that I'm aware of is more likely, is more authentic, is more true, is more probable, right? So they are living in a particular reality, and we living in another reality, looking into that and saying, well, why can't they see it? And of course, you've had the same thing happening politically, I think, in America, running up to the previous elections. And this isn't going to be a political episode, just to recognize that you had America pretty much split down the middle, with the one side believing in a particular reality about America's political fate and whatever, and then another side believing something else. And if you just think about that, if you put that almost as a blueprint either underneath the Morphew case or on top of it, and you say, well, what is going on here? Well, what is going on is any information that is happening that you disagree with, you just simply dismiss, right? So, and that is how you have the sort of two sides to the story. That is how you have this dichotomy, this duality, is you have two sides that are irreconcilable to one another, and yet they're part of the same, America is still one country. The Morphews are one family. And so how did this actually happen? How did this reality happen? Well, you're now having a situation where there's denial going on. They're denying that, there seems to be denial that someone was responsible for something. And so, what else could it be? Well, it could be a mountain lion, it could be anything. It's just not me, right? It's not the thing that you don't want it to be. So in other words, it comes down to beliefs. And can you imagine the Morphews sitting down in their lounge, watching television, or browsing the internet, and then coming across a story that is about the search for Suzanne, about what Barry was doing? How do they as a family respond to that? I'm not talking about the extended family, I'm talking about Barry, Mallory, and Macy. And Mallory and Macy seem to have been almost separated from the rest of their family, and Barry seems to have them in his confidence, right? They are sort of around him, almost like guarding him, protecting him, whereas he was doing the same previously. And I think the answer is, when the news comes out and it's not looking good, it's easy just to say fake news, it's fake news. Anything that doesn't reflect well on him, it's fake news. And then you say, well, why would they do that? Is there some kind of conspiracy or agenda against Barry? Yeah, no, well, maybe he's got enemies out there or something like that. Why on earth would law enforcement decide to want to frame Barry Morphew, right? But that is nevertheless probably something like that is the preferable scenario to that their father did something. Because if their father did do something and they accept that, then they've lost both parents effectively. And then where do they go? Then who's going to look after them? I think another way to talk about this, which may be even more familiar to you, and this is, if you're perhaps not an American, how did you deal with the news of the coronavirus, right? So the news of the coronavirus and the vaccines, I don't know whether you've changed your mind about that. Probably not. But if you haven't, you've come to the coronavirus scenario, which is kind of an unknown. It's a new thing. It's a source of anxiety. And you've either been dismissive of it or you've been perhaps even overly anxious of it. But the point is, there's been a lot of information coming out from certain areas, from certain authorities, and how do you deal with that? And the answer is you deal with it based on your primary belief. And so if your primary belief is, this is not good for my job, it's not convenient to me, and I just basically gravitate to the view that the coronavirus is probably just made up. It's a global conspiracy. And I can't really explain how it works, but that's what it is, and so I'm not going to be affected by it. And so what you see with that is a scenario where your beliefs then inform everything else. So if Macy and Mallory basically believe that their father's innocent because it suits them to believe that, it is something, I guess, positive, then it makes sense to then anything that contradicts that then goes into the outbox. It goes into the trash. It goes into the recycle bin, right? And the coronavirus is a lot like that. Is there an upside to believing that this thing is really out there? In other words, is there a benefit to taking these precautions? And when it's something that's invisible, and if you're younger and relatively healthy, then it's not going to affect you. Well, then why on earth is it not in your benefit to be dismissive of it? In other words, your beliefs are based on what suits you. Your beliefs are based on what benefits you. But that's not the truth. It's simply what serves you, right? So now we've looked at it from kind of a political scenario where you have political beliefs. We've looked at it from a practical scenario where you say, well, does this suit me or not? And now I'm going to take it to another dimension, which is to some extent who you are, who you are foundationally, who you are based on your beliefs. So if you take it to, if you're a Christian, for example, if you're a believer, and this family was that the children, I think, were on a church camp. The daughters were on a church camp. Suzanne, I think, was quite a strong Christian. I'm not quite sure about Barry. I don't know to what extent her faith had an impact in limiting him as a person. I don't know. It's simply unknown at this point. His family members might know. And I don't know to what extent Suzanne's faith may have limited her daughters in how they can socialize and what they can do, how much freedom they are given. It's just difficult to know. But if you, in a scenario, if you compare and I realize this is going to cause some discomfort among some people because it's very general, but if you are a Christian in America, I think there's quite a good chance that you also of a particular, let's say, political persuasion, right? And as a result, you then would say, it matters more to me what I believe than what the facts or what this news agency like CNN is fake news, the New York Times is fake news, and so it's very easy to then dismiss any information that is supposedly factual because it just doesn't correspond to your beliefs. And that can then become politicized, and it can also become of practical use where you say, well, practically this doesn't really serve my interests, right? But if you take it into the Morpheus scenario, how surprising would it be if you've had a long period of Americans dismissing information? I'm talking about what is happening in America. So leading up to the elections, can you even rely on the elections being legitimate? Lots of areas where information is described as fake and it is not true, and you can't trust it. You can't trust what the media says. You can't trust this, that, and the next thing, right? And then within that same thing, you have also the corona thing going on, where you're told to wear a mask, but I'm not going to wear a mask because I have the right to. And so with this going on in the background, why on earth would you not say, if you are one of the Morpheus, say, well, this is just another example of that. This is just another example of fake things swirling around, and somehow we got caught in the maelstrom, and none of it is real. It's just fake news. That's the simple solution. Of course, none of that is scientific. All of that is just based on a sense, a kind of a cultural sense of almost continuity, where you say, well, this information doesn't suit me, so I'm allowed to dismiss it. And it seems to me something that has gone from where the consumer has been able to buy products that are customized. You can buy a toothbrush in the color that you want it. You can buy, you can interior decorate your home. You can have your own personal environment that you've paid for exactly the way you want it. So why wouldn't you want the information that comes to you the same way? Which is what you do with social media to some extent. You block the people you disagree with. You filter out, or either you filter out the news that you don't like, or Google does that for you in terms of recommended things and in terms of algorithms. And so when information is out there that you're just not comfortable with, well, isn't it just absolutely natural that you would just not believe it? That's all you do. I'm just not going to think about it. And so if you want a practical example of that, of flouting reality, of how can you live in a world where, it just seems obvious that something's happening, but you just don't see it. Well, here it is. And, we on the outside looking into the Morpheus case, we feel that frustration. We feel like, what about even the health and safety of these children? What about, what is going to happen to them if they don't see the light? And on the other hand, if they do see the light, what then? Who is there to take care of them? What is going to happen, right? But I think the simple way in which we can look into their lives and say, wow, can't you see what is going on? That kind of thing is happening in certain respects with us as well. In terms of things where we are prisoners of our own minds, in certain respects. There's certain areas where politically we may be on the right track, but in terms of, say, coronavirus, maybe not. I can acknowledge that I've probably been too careful with coronavirus. I probably could have continued going to gym. It's just very difficult with something like a global pandemic to say, how much is too careful before it's actually played out, if that makes sense. So I would just imagine that caution is more, it's wise to be cautious in the face of something like a global viral pandemic than the opposite. If you make a mistake being too cautious, well, you can live to tell the tale. Whereas if you make a mistake not being cautious, you may not. So that's the one side of the story. I just want to deal with the statement by David Moorman, Suzanne's brother, and just not the whole statement, just part of it, where he says something about Melinda saying that Suzanne was like a rose among thorns. and this is a quote from their statement, "In the coming months we will be forced to come to grips with the details of a murder that is still unimaginable." And, just those words, that they are going to be forced to come to grips with it, they probably should have been coming to grips with it in the days after she disappeared. That's the best time to come to grips with something like that, when the details are still fresh, when the suspect may not have kind of dug himself in and battened down the hatches, when the daughters were uncertain what was going on. That would be the best time to get certainty. And also the word unimaginable, it's not unimaginable. Murders are happening all the time. It's really not unimaginable. There are, as bad as this is, there are worse things happening in America, like the shooting at King Soopers in Boulder, which is kind of in that area of Colorado. It's not unimaginable. And I remember someone calling even the shooting, that mass shooting, unimaginable, and someone saying it's not. We've got to move away from saying there are no words to describe this. Well, there are. But we've got to say this with sympathy, because obviously sometimes you have very close, cohesive families, and something like this happening, I guess, is very unexpected, right? But a year later, it's not unimaginable. It has happened. He goes on to say, "I'm constantly hounded by the question, how did we get here? How does a man take the life of his wife and the mother of his daughters? How do character flaws turn you into a murderer? Is it nature or nurture?" And then he says something about, "Nothing I say here will change minds, and I will leave it to the experts or the FBI to outline at the trial the cunning personality traits of Barry Morphew." So in a weird way, David seems to answer his own question. He refers to Barry Morphew as cunning, and that is a word I brought up. I'm not sure if I said crafty, but a hunter needs stealth. A hunter needs strategy when stalking his prey. And so that is definitely part of Barry Morphew's identity. He was married to Suzanne for 32 years. It might be a little bit longer, but he was married to her for quite a long time. And the questions you've kind of got to ask, you can take the murder totally out of the equation, out of the narrative, and just say, imagine if two people are married. Why would one want to feel that they want to get divorced? Such as Bill and Melinda Gates, such as Prince Charles and Princess Diana. Why, if people have been together, will one or perhaps both feel like, I don't want to be with you anymore? Why? And I think the answer is, you have been pursuing a fairy tale, and the fairy tale has gone. And in the place of the fairy tale is a nightmare. Another possibility is, you thought you were getting a fairy tale, you didn't get a fairy tale, and while your fairy tale was sort of unraveling, you stumbled upon another fairy tale, or you started being tempted towards another fairy tale, or the idea of a fairy tale, like with Chris Watts. So in other words, the awareness of another fairy tale starts to turn your present circumstances, your present situation, into a nightmare, right? So it starts to feel horrible for you, but it's because of what you sense that you're missing, right? It's because of a perception that you're not getting what you deserve, right? And so for whatever reason, Barry seemed to be seeing a fairy tale for him that was outside of his marriage. I'm not saying outside of his family. He obviously still wanted his daughters part of the picture, but he wanted some other fairy tale. And so that is how, and same thing with Chris Watts, same thing with Patrick Frazee, same thing with a lot of these cases. You start to become tempted by something else, but because you're such a good guy, because you can do no wrong, you don't want other people to see the bad side to you. And I know, and it's a silly example, I know when we went on holiday, my father never wanted to take the dogs to the kennels because he didn't want to be the bad guy to the dogs. So he had someone else take them, right? And I thought that was a bit silly. I thought, just take responsibility for what's got to be done. But some people want to be seen as the hero. They want to be seen as the good guy. And so in a scenario like divorce, then there's not a good guy. You are admitting that things haven't worked out, that perhaps you're not a good husband because you don't want to be married anymore. And all of these nasty things need to be confronted. But there's a much easier way of dealing with it. What if the person just disappeared? What if the person just one day wasn't there anymore? And quite a few people took this, saw this as a better alternative. Scott Peterson, Chris Watts, Patrick Frazee, and now it looks like it could have been Barry Morphy as well. And in all of those cases, they didn't think, or they didn't say to the media, to anyone else, I think my wife has come to harm. I think she's in danger. I think she's hurt. It was, oh no, she just vanished. She disappeared. She's missing. There's nothing wrong. She's not hurt. And God forbid she's not dead. She's just missing. Actually, no, it's the other thing. And that corresponds to the same euphemistic approach to divorce. I don't want to get divorced. I'm going to have to pay for something, and people aren't going to think very well of me, and there's going to be airing of dirty laundry. And it's going to be this long process that's going to cost me. I don't want to pay the price. I don't want to have to pay the price. So how we get here, and you see this with Scott Peterson, the golden boy of his family, Chris Watts, the golden boy of his family, and to some extent just a golden boy all round, where everyone thought he was such a nice guy. Patrick Frazee was also well liked within his community, and he lived with his mother. His mother probably thought he was quite wonderful, and incidentally his mother never testified at trial. In fact, nobody did with the Patrick Frazee case. When you have this golden boy persona, they don't want to acknowledge that they failed at something, that the fairy tale's over. They'd rather that something just conveniently be swept under the carpet. And isn't that what happened with Suzanne? I do think it's extremely naive of people to be hoping for a confession. This isn't the Chris Watts case. Confessions like the Chris Watts confession are very rare, and the Chris Watts confession isn't really legitimate anyway. It's true that he committed the crimes, and he said he committed the crimes, but the way he did still isn't demonstrably true. So I don't think a confession is going to happen. I also think there is a strong possibility of another woman that, or the idea of another woman, because that is something that was present in all the cases that I've cited. Chris Watts, Scott Peterson, Patrick Frazee, and there's a South African case that I'll be talking about in the next episode dealing with Will the Children Testify, Jason Roeder. There's also another woman mixed up in that scenario. So I'll be talking to you guys about that. I just want to finalize this statement from David Moorman where he says, and this is a quote from his statement, he says, "As my father Jean lay dying of cancer, there were many moments he was brought to tears thinking about his granddaughters, Mallory and Macy. In one of our final conversations on the matter, I pledged to him that 3 of us, Melinda, Andrew and myself, would help them bridge this horrific event and do whatever we could to help them develop into the woman Suzanne envisioned. Despite what they have been told, we love them and want to let them know we are here for them as we all move forward." And that's the end of the quote. So despite what they have been told is touching on this thing where they've been told something. They've been told that that's fake news. Don't trust that. The wall's against us, or whatever it is. And they believed it. And they're clinging to the fact, they're clinging to the hope that their father is innocent, because if he's not, then it's kind of like the end of the world. then who do they turn to? So I do think there are probably prayers going on with those girls, praying to God, perhaps reading the Bible, perhaps God has been, in terms of their belief in God, they, according to what they're reading in the Bible, don't be deceived by the world, and trust in your father and mother so your days may be longer, or something like that. And so as a result, they are sticking close to their father, right? And there are a lot of references to father for God in the Bible as well, which can, I guess, be somewhat ambiguous. So just a final point to note, and this is something I've already highlighted being similar with the Chris Watts case, is you may have a situation, and it could even be the JonBenet Ramsey case as well. You may have a situation where, because Suzanne had cancer twice, she didn't need to say anything or do anything, but the mere fact that she fell ill while her husband is this tower of strength, this picture of health, there may be just a psychological sense that, she is losing her life or losing her vitality. So you have one spouse who is healthy and strong, but the other one is ill. And that illness is a reminder that life is finite, that life is limited, and that you're not getting your fairy tale. I want to go water skiing. Well, you've got cancer, we can't go out. I want to go and climb that mountain. Well, you've got cancer, we can't do that. And so indirectly, there's this sense of limitedness, inhibitedness, restriction because of illness. And I think all of that, it probably did have financial implications as well. And so at the time that all of this is happening, her father's also got cancer. You might have the sense of, I want to throw off these shackles. I want to be free. I want to be free from this. I want to be alive. I want to be this free spirit, this mountain man. I want the money that's mine, and I want the life that's mine. And then how does this manifest in what happened to Suzanne? Well, maybe that's how. I'm entitled to a full, happy, joyful life. I'm healthy. And you may also have had, from the children's perspective, the fact that Suzanne disappeared, well, she was weak, in a weakened state previous to that anyway. And doesn't that mean that God was blessing their father with good health because he had favor or something like that? That might enter the thought process as well. I'm just saying, I do think that the cancer played a significant role. In the JonBenet Ramsey case, Patsy had cancer, and that had an impact, I believe, on Patsy's relationship, not only with John, her marriage, not only with John, but also with Burke. And I think that can definitely cause a strain. I don't think the finances were an issue in the Ramsey case, but it certainly creates a tension that would otherwise not be there. And that tension and anxiety can manifest in anality and sadism, definitely. If you feel humiliated because your partner's not well and, for whatever reason, that may manifest in a sadistic way, and maybe that is what happened here. So that is it for this episode. I'll be back in the next episode talking a little bit about the possibilities of the Morphew daughters testifying, and I'm sure you're going to find that episode quite interesting. So look out for that. If you haven't subscribed, please do like, share, leave a comment, and I'll see you guys next time.